That's right. Breaking news. And this is real breaking news. You know, sometimes I just turn that thing on because I think they want to rest for a minute. But this is real breaking news, folks, because I'm sitting here on the left versus the right. And the man on my left, who is really on my right, is a mayoral candidate. And he has gotten a tremendous uplift in support in the past few days, led by the former governor of this state and pretty good friend of mine when we were in the state Senate together, George Pataki, who believes that Curtis Sliwa's feeling that there would be, in a sense, a four-way general election race will come true, and that since Curtis received 30% of the vote last time, he's got a good chance to knock off some of these opponents. This would all be assuming that Mr. Mondani or whatever he calls himself will win the primary against Andrew Cuomo. It'd be a lot harder if Andrew Cuomo wins the primary. But nonetheless, it has raised Curtis, who's toiled in the vineyards, who's shriveled in the shadows, who has walked on the wild side. He is in this race. And I, who in 2021, when asked on the radio by Frank Morano, how could Curtis Sliwa win the mayor's race? And I said that there'd be an earthquake and he's the only survivor. I have to take that back now because I might have to ask him for a job in a few months. So, Curtis, welcome to the left and the right, and tell us about the activities that have gone on in the last 48 hours.
Well, remember, I haven't had a primary like I did the last time in 2021 against a guy named Fernando Mateo. Boy, we haven't seen him since. And then I got into the general, and there were only two candidates, Eric Adams, Democrat, Curtis Sliwa, Republican. And so it came down that the voters elected Eric Adams, although, as you know, in the campaign and in the debates, I kept warning people, you will have chaos, there will be corruption, and unfortunately, I was correct. And now we see that Eric Adams is a candidate with no party. He didn't vie to try to win the Democratic primary as a sitting mayor, which is unusual because even John Lindsay attempted to win his party's nomination on re-election and lost to John Markey. So he just opted to go independent. And I got to ask you, since you've been a friend of Eric Adams, he decided to go with two independent lines. One is safe streets, affordable housing, of which we don't have either, and then fight anti-Semitism. He hasn't done that in 3.5 years. So now he's been told he can only have one independent line. And he said, no, I want two, maybe three, maybe four, maybe more. What happened? But he will be in the general. Mondani will be in the general no matter what happens because he will have the Working Families Party line. Andrew Cuomo hedged his bet. And for the first time, I think, in his life, went out and collected signatures for an independent line. You have a guy named Jim Walden. Nobody really knows him yet. He's running on an independent line. And then you have Curtis Sliwa, Republican candidate, Gov, and also, for the first time ever, an independent line, protect animals. No-kill shelters and go after animal abusers, which I think you recognize as an animal lover yourself, can be an icebreaker for those who would never in their life vote for a Republican, but because of their love of animals, might vote for me on that independent protecting animals line. So if I start with 30%, all you got to do, ladies and gentlemen, is do the math. And unless somebody's able to come and take my percentage of the vote, you're looking at and you're talking to Governor David Paterson, the next mayor of the city of New York, and there will be no job for you. I guarantee you that. Don't even bother putting your resume in, because I won't forget what you told Frank Morano
Yes.
in 2021. Although, what's interesting is that Eric Adams still has this desire, this need to run as a Republican. You know, early on he had a chance. The three of the five county chair people would have given him a Wilson Pakula, which would have given him the right to run in a primary against me. He very wisely decided not to do that because, boy, that would have been embarrassing for him in a Republican primary.
Right.
But now you always hear, oh, but there's a possibility, maybe they'll give Curtis Sliwa a job in Washington, D.C. Yeah, I would last all of 5 seconds in the Trump administration, as you know, Governor David Paterson. Maybe they could give him a judgeship. No. And, well, maybe he'll die or move out of the state. Well, people have tried to kill me before. Are they suggesting that maybe a cab will hit me when I'm crossing the street or bullets will go flying like has happened before? What do they mean by that, Governor David Paterson?
Well, I think that there is a perception that your 30% that you received in 2021, that some of the other candidates could cut into it. So, for instance, if Mandami is the Democratic nominee, and I would assume that Andrew Cuomo would still run as an independent,
yes,
that he might be able to slice some votes off
yes,
from people who are Republicans, but they are, looking for someone like Cuomo, who is a centrist. And I think that's a thought. But, once you get 4 or 5 lines, anything can happen. And in this situation, it'll be honest voting in November, where you might even know who won the election that night.
Let me ask you a question, though. You said Andrew Cuomo, a centrist. Do you even have centrists in the Democratic Party any longer?
I know one thing. We don't even have money in the Democratic Party anymore. The National Democratic Party is now broke. So we can start over and start trying to put this together. And at other times, such as President Reagan's landslide victory in 1980, and then he wins again in 84, and his popularity is so great that it extends to George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988, part of the reason the Democratic Party couldn't get back in the game is that we didn't address where the people in the country were moving at that particular time. But then in 1992, a guy like Bill Clinton comes in and he says, the pain argument doesn't work anymore. We're not going to talk about all these things that are wrong with society that we're going to fix. We're going to talk about raising America's profile internationally. And that was finally how the streak was broken, when Clinton was really able to articulate how the public felt in 1992. They didn't feel the same way that they did in 1988. So I think that right now, this is a wide open race. It's fascinating, the difference in the candidates. It's interesting, all these discussions about the independent lines, and Mayor Adams has got to understand we make enough of a mockery. We make enough of it with ranked choice voting. Now we're going to have people with unlimited independent lines. If you're so independent, why do you need all these lines? So I think that...
but you're an expert on this, Governor David Paterson, because you've dealt with all these candidates except Mandami. One candidate you have not had any interaction with is Mandami. But you recently endorsed Andrew Cuomo. You had been part of the support team for Team Adams. And very briefly, you were an advisor to the Walden campaign. So now I'm giving you the opportunity, since you did the trifecta, the troika, the trinity. Now you can come on board with Team Sliwa, and I can have you lead Democrats for Curtis Sliwa. Now, I'll have to tell Robert Holden, the councilman from Middle Village, guess what? Move over, Robert Holden, Democrat. Governor David Paterson is leading this effort.
Yeah, the major reason that I endorsed former Governor Cuomo is that at one point there were some internal polls showing that Mandami had gotten within 5 points of him. I feel if Mandami wins the Democratic nomination, it is going to send this whole process into almost like a civil war. And Andrew Cuomo has come back from his escapades of 4 or 5 years ago, and seems to have redirected himself. I still don't think that he answers the questions in a way he could, which would relieve everybody of the issues about how he treated women in the office and also the tremendous number of deaths in the nursing home. And by the way, Curtis, I remember you and John Katzimatidis bringing this issue up back in March, late March of 2020.
Yes.
About the nursing homes.
Good memory. You're very cogent. You are not suffering what some Democrats suffer from and some Republicans is the Biden failure to remember certain facts. You're very good. You're very cogent.
Thank you. Well, I was a disciple of Joe Biden. No, I'm not. I'm not. So let's talk about, we're in the general now.
Yes.
I would tend to think that the most dominant issue would be affordable housing. Every mayoral candidate said they were going to fix it. Every mayor struggled with it. I thought you might have maybe an alternative point of view or an idea that hasn't been brought out. And if you do, I'd like to hear it.
Well, it's already happening. People are fleeing. They're leaving the city in droves. So there's going to be some available housing and houses on the market. But seriously, every one of these plans is going to manifest itself maybe 10, 15 years from now. We'll have 500,000 units. We'll have 1 million units. Okay.
You'll be in a nursing home when it happens.
Exactly. Or dead.
Yeah.
How is that going to address the problem now? So I prefer to look at it from the outer boroughs. I'm the only candidate who's actually running on an outer borough platform. A part of this problem is that Eric Adams, as soon as he beat me the last time, announced that he was going to have the City of Yes. The City of Yes would address the fact that we only have about 1.5% vacancy rate of existing places to live. And that's not good. I think we can all admit that. You need to have a larger variety of locations that people can find a live in. But the City of Yes will now eliminate a city council person's right to stop an issue that would impact their neighborhood, their councilmanic district. You don't have to go to the community board. The restrictive zoning disappears. And now you let these developers and realtors come into a residential area of 1 and 2 family homes, and they can put up a 20-story, 40-story apartment building with no parking. And you say to yourself, okay, even if you were to do that, where are these people going to park their cars? Nobody addresses that. It's really the idea is they just want people to have bicycles. They don't want them to have cars. The infrastructure cannot support that. And some people want to live in 1 and 2 family homes. Why would you destroy what is the heart and soul of a lot of the outer boroughs, especially Staten Island, parts of Brooklyn, parts of Queens, parts of the Bronx? And yet there seems to be no care of that. In that also, you have these lithium-ion battery warehouses that they're building everywhere, only in the outer boroughs, not in Manhattan, that are a danger to residential areas because they need to be in industrial areas. So people in the outer boroughs feel under siege. So I say, look at the apartments that are already mothballed, that have been taken off the marketplace. There's 5,000 apartments in NYCHA that are not being used. I would ask that first. How can we have 5,000 empty apartments in NYCHA that are not being used, that are being mothballed? Then you have the rent stabilized. There's about 30,000 apartments. Why are they off the marketplace? Why are so many homeowners in the outer boroughs, the moment they get rid of somebody who hasn't paid their rent and they've been a squatter for a while, or somebody dies or moves, like so many others, to Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, or parts unknown, they're not putting the apartments on the marketplace to be rented because everyone fears that if you have to ask a tenant to leave, they're not going to leave. And then you have to incur the expense of increased water rates, sewage rates, electricity rates, and increased property taxes. So you're really killing the outer boroughs. And that's what I'm saying is let's find places to live that already exist. Let's not put these grandiose plans in effect in which you're going to give tax abatements for 10 years, 15 years, and by the time you build the apartment building, there's little, if any, affordable housing. Let's go after those units that are out there, that are empty, that are warehouse, that people probably with a little bit of rehab could start moving into quite rapidly and quite readily.
Well, considering the fact that we've had a situation where there are people who over on the west side live in these 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, they probably make $750,000 a year at their jobs, but they only really pay about $1,200 to live there. Then you have others who are a family. They're in a small place. The mother may work for a union, and they're paying $4,000 to be
Correct.
there. And what would be the most immediate action you could take to stop that situation from occurring?
Well, see, that's very difficult because people, the majority of people in the city are renters. They're not homeowners. They're not condo or co-op owners. I mean, you have a situation, you got 100,000 condo and co-op owners. Local law 97 is now going to force them to increase their maintenance costs by $30,000 because they're trying to green everything. They're trying to make everything electrical. You're going to be driving these people out. So I think it's a combination of things. The small landlords are getting hammered unmercifully, and the property taxes for them go up. So, for instance, let's use an example. Bill de Blasio, he has Brownstone in Park Slope. His assessment is lower than an assessment in the outer boroughs, in neighborhoods in Staten Island, Brooklyn, southern Brooklyn, or Queens. We need to do complete reassessments because some of these folks have been grandfathered in. So if you live in northern Brooklyn with all these brownstones that are $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, they're paying less property taxes than somebody who owns a home out where Frank Morano is, the house store of Staten Island and Tottenville. So I don't want to put together these grand plans until we straighten out what we already have and level the playing field so that people can continue to rent out what space they have. We can keep the condo and co-op owners, and we can keep the small property owners who are now deciding, I got to get out of here. I can't make ends meet. And our city's not helping them at all. They're just making it more burdensome for them.
Well, I think that with regard to all of this, that it's kind of shocking that you watch these campaign commercials
Yes.
and you hear about, the money that's going to be spent. We're going to do all these things. And as you very accurately pointed out, to actually accomplish that would take far beyond what their term would be and maybe beyond where their life would be. And I think that's what's making this campaign a little bit of a farce to a certain degree.
Well, the other thing, Governor Paterson, and this involves all the candidates, not just me, you're entitled, Campaign Finance Board, if you accept matching funds, which we all do, you're entitled, you must have 2 debates. So they'll ask a question like you just asked me, and you gave me time to extrapolate. 30 seconds. What are we going to do about the housing crisis in New York City? 30 seconds, Governor David Paterson. I can't even tell you in 30 seconds how to balance my checkbook. And they want a comprehensive answer. They don't want conversations. They just want sound bites. And the moderators keep interfering with the candidates. Let the candidates have a discussion. Moderators should be there to make sure it doesn't get too raucous. But you notice how in that first debate amongst the Democrats, I think we heard more from the moderators at time, all the different reporters, than we actually did from the candidates
they're in their glory.
themselves.
They're in the middle of a campaign debate. Well, we're going to hold that for a second, Curtis. We're going to come back, and I'm going to ask you about a piece of campaign literature I saw and have you give an analysis of what it's really about. We're on the left versus the right. We're on WABC, and we're coming back right after these words. We're back on the left versus the right with mayoral candidate Curtis Sliwa, who will not be on your ballot on Tuesday because he has the Republican Party nomination. They don't have all the stuff over there that we have in the Democratic Party where 15 people run for mayor and then they endorse each other and then one person endorses a candidate who won't even endorse her. But we're with Curtis Sliwa, and Curtis, it's a campaign issue as I see it. I went to my mailbox the other day, and I take out this big flyer, cardboard flyer, and even I could see that it's talking about Mamdani and what a terrible person he is, and this and that and the other thing. And so, I look at it, and then when I'm just turning it around with the other mail, on the other side is a big picture of him. And it spells his name out, Mamdani. And I'm thinking, when people check their mail, this could be considered to be his literature that he put out. If you're going to attack him, you don't put his picture on the flyer. What say you, sir?
That your guy, Cuomo, has too much money to spend. He's got bloomy dollars. So, oh, my God. And this shows you how they're worried. So the billionaire class is throwing money at Cuomo like there's no tomorrow. They're worried that Mamdani gets elected. They may have to flee also. I've never seen such panic investing in a campaign so late into the campaign itself by individuals. Obviously, this money is going into PACs. But I think that's the problem. They're so flush with money that everything is Mamdani. I saw a campaign commercial on television in which Mamdani looked like he was part of Al-Qaeda. They had penciled his beard in.
Oh, no.
Like he looked like Osama bin Laden. They had him in that kind of garb. And you say to yourself, that may have worked 20, 30 years ago. That doesn't work with the new generation. To me, this is a generational dispute. No matter what you say about Mamdani, people under 40 years old put this guy on a pedestal. No matter what you say about Cuomo, if you're 55 plus, they put him on a pedestal, mostly because of his father, Mario Cuomo. The Cuomo name resonates. But it really is, to a great degree, AOC, all our crazy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, leader of the Socialists of America, really pinned it when she endorsed Mamdani. She said, this is a generational dispute. Our new generation, it's our time. Cuomo represents the old generation that doesn't want to let go. And I really think that's what you're going to see when ultimately all the ranked choice voting votes are counted and somebody wins or doesn't win. But, as much as everyone's getting bent out of shape, you pointed it out. If Cuomo and Mamdani are 1 and 2 in the polling now, they're going to be in the general race. It doesn't matter. They're still there. And now you got Eric Adams. You got this guy, Jim Walden, that very few people know. And you got Curtis Sliwa, who everybody knows, but they either like me or they don't like me. But I don't need everybody to vote for me or like me with 5 people in the race. I just need 30%. Conceivably, Brian Lair, a colleague of ours at WNYC, did the math. No fan of Curtis Sliwa, as you know, Governor David Paterson. He said conceivably with 27% of the vote, Curtis Sliwa could become the next mayor. It's not based on percentage. It's whoever has the most votes.
Now, this is just fascinating to me. Had a conversation on Cat's Roundtable at 5 o'clock, mostly with Weinberg and Katz. And I was trying to say to them that as much as you think Mamdani has this support because of these anti-Israel positions he has, I think a lot of his support come from people who just don't like older politicians. They don't think they've tried as hard as they could. They don't think they've produced as well as they could. And they kept going back to what he said about Israel and what he said about this and that. And he did say those things, and they are right to be antagonistic to him. But I don't think they understand where all of his support is coming from.
Well, you know that firsthand. I saw you waiting there in the on-deck circle for hours with Judge Weinberg and others of the generation that produced Dinkins and Giuliani back to back, who were there to support Randy Mastro to become head of the Corporation Council of New York City for Eric Adams. And remember, that council, they delayed. They didn't want to hear from you. They called you dinosaurs. You know, they blamed you for all the problems that were taking place. And Randy Mastro, they wanted no part of him because he was from a different generation. So nobody's listening to what AOC is saying. She's got her finger on the pulse. Now, look, she goes out with a guy who's so old. I forget how old Bernie the Altacaca Sanders is. But he resonates with the younger people because of his politics. But she is the heir apparent. And it is clear that in my generation, because I believe I'm older than you, Governor Paterson, I'm 71.
2 months.
Right. We were told, don't trust anybody over 30 in the anti-war years, in the 60s, the volatile 60s. Don't trust anybody over 30. And there was a generational split. I remember Emmanuel Sellers was in the House of Representatives 50 years. And he was like the chairman of one of the big committees. And all of a sudden, Elizabeth Holtzman in her 20s, late 20s, early 30s, came forward, was doing basically what AOC did against Joe Crowley, going door to door, good old-fashioned retail politics. And she upset a guy who was 50 years in the House of Representatives that everybody respected. It was a generational change. And I don't even think it has anything to do with the politics. I think you have nailed it.
Yeah.
They just don't like the fuddy-duddy generation that produced you, Cuomo, Bloomberg, that whole era. But somehow they've given me a pass because they don't assume that I'm like all of you.
Well, you know, it was also true in Harlem where Reverend Adam Clayton Powell ruled that area of the borough of Manhattan, and nothing happened unless it went past him. And then in 1970, this, upstart Charlie Rangel goes around, but Charlie Rangel was knocking on doors while Adam Powell was drinking champagne in Bimini. And by the end of that election, Powell lost. And he actually had what would inevitably become a Trump-esque response that the election was actually stolen from him. How would he know? He didn't have any staff there. He didn't have any supporters there. And the voters saw this young, strong, kind of articulate guy, Charlie Rangel, and voted for him. But if you looked at their political policies, they were exactly the same. But sometimes, time moves by and people are looking for something new.
And look, we experienced that in the 60s. John Lindsay, young, dapper, he could have been a runway model, an actor, silk stocking district, Republican, but Rockefeller-style Republican, not a Barry Goldwater-style Republican. And remember, the young generation, they loved John Lindsay. They followed him. They went out. They volunteered for him. He was very Kennedy-esque.
And he absorbed it. He called New York Fun City.
Right. The problem was he just wasn't a good mayor.
Right. And he got reelected by the Mets.
Right.
He didn't get reelected by anything he did.
The Mets, he had no line. He was like Eric Adams. The Republicans had rejected him. They chose the patrician state senator, John Markey. The Democrats chose the tried and true, the candidate of my household in Canarsie, Brooklyn, Mario Procaccino, the son of a shoemaker, the man who coined the expression limousine liberal.
Yeah.
When describing John Lindsay, of which he was. And you're right, the Miracle Mets, who pulled the rabbit out of their hat by beating the Baltimore Orioles, who had 5 starters who were 20-game winners, had Frank Robinson in left field, Brooks Robinson at third base. They were unbeatable. They win, and Lindsay pretends to be a Met fan. He embraces them, parade through the Canyon of Heroes, and he was running on the liberal line that Alex Rose and David Dubinsky had given him, which was basically an independent line. And he got reelected mayor, and then soon after, flipped the script and said oofa to the Republicans. He became a Democrat.
Tried to run for president.
Right. Went down to Florida, and all the New Yorkers went down there and haunted him. But notice, that's the other problem. everybody who runs for mayor, if they do get elected, right away, their aide de camp say, oh, you could run for president. You could be the president. You get all this attention. And it is a dead end. The moment you run for mayor, you will never be elected to political office again. Just look at Bill de Blasio. They created a special congressional district in what used to be the heart of his district, Park Slope, and he had to drop out. The poll results were so dismal. No mayor has gone on to achieve elective office. And most
Anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere.
Right. They have look at Bloomberg. $1 billion got him America's Samoa.
Yeah.
An evisceration by Elizabeth Warren, who did a Kill Bill to him, not once, but twice.
Oh, it was like WWE, the way she smashed him. And he looked shocked. I guess, in his world, nobody yells back at him.
No.
And but he was stunned by it. And I was stunned by his reaction to it because
But you would have thought that after that, he would have prepared for the second round.
Yeah, but he didn't.
And notice, all the other candidates and Democrats realized that was like his form of kryptonite. Just putting Elizabeth Warren out
in
there.
front of him.
They didn't bother to ask questions. They just let her take over, and she knocked him out of the box. But this is what I suggest. Any future mayoral candidates, if you're lucky enough to become mayor, you have a perfect opportunity to go into the world of talk radio. Ed Koch did that. Rudy Giuliani did that. I'm more than prepared to do that after I finish probably what will be 4 years, maybe 8 years. Thank God for term limits. You have an opportunity.
I think you should consider a third term.
A third term, yes. Okay. Nobody will want a third term. Remember, Bloomberg bribed his way into a third term, and then the person who caught the angst from the voters for that was Christine Quinn.
When she tried to run in 2013, people didn't forget what happened in 2009.
He gave her money. He got all the editorial endorsements. It was like a fait accompli. Here comes Anthony Weiner, who had already resigned from Congress. He jumps back in. He goes right to the top. And Christine Quinn, with the glow-in-the-dark orange Revlon hair, just melted, and she couldn't get up. Didn't matter. See, all this talk about Bloomberg money and Bloomberg support, don't kid yourself. That's not a guarantee that you're going to be elected mayor. Just look at Christine Quinn.
People saw through what they did in 2009. And for our listeners that didn't happen to hear the show, Curtis was on about, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we talked about how the night of that election in 2009, with 40% of the vote in, Mayor Bloomberg trailed the controller, William Thompson, and given another week, Bloomberg would have been defeated by Bill Thompson.
Not only that, Bloomberg locked up all the editorial endorsements. He got all the union endorsements, even though he was a Republican, except for Norman Seabrook of the correctional union, who actually bolted from Bloomberg. And I remember seeing him on New York One that night saying, Billy Thompson is ahead and looks like he's going to become the next mayor. And that's going to make me a savant. That's going to make me a soothsayer, because he had put all of his chips on Billy Thompson, and Billy Thompson almost won that election. Bloomberg spent $100 million that we know of in that election and almost lost that. So this concept that, Bloomy dollars are going to sway that. Hey, he gave a lot of money to the Harris campaign. It didn't move the needle for her. In fact, here in New York City, 500,000 registered Democrats chose not to vote. They didn't vote for Trump. They just didn't come out to vote. And that's what led to him getting 30% of the vote, which was his best tally ever in New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at education in the city, right now, there are all of these sort of new plans coming out of, the leadership in that particular field. But I did a graduation yesterday at a school that, Curtis, was named after me. At the same school that didn't want to let me in when I was a little kid. And at that graduation, they have 9821 or something. It's the indication that a child has a certain disability, They have these problems, and it seems like we're just learning to define more illnesses than we are trying to fix the problem. But we're going to fix the problem right after we come back.
Well, hold on. They have a school named in your honor?
Yes.
I'll bet you it ain't in New York City.
It's in Hempstead, Long Island.
Oh.
The David Paterson School. It's only goes up to 6th grade now.
Oh, I see.
When I was there, it went up to 8th grade. So we'll be back right after these messages with a shocking conclusion of this afternoon's discussion on can Curtis Sliwa become mayor of the city of New York?
Yeah.
We're back with the left versus the right. This is our final segment for the day. Then you can hear John Sterling and his thoughts on sports. You know, Curtis, I used to listen to John Sterling when he was the announcer for the New York Nets, when Julius Erving played for the Nets. And we used to go to the Nassau Coliseum, all 20 of us, to see him play.
Now let me ask you a question. Was this when Lou Carnesecca was the coach with his sweater?
Yes. Yeah. He was the coach then.
Yeah, and by the way, John Sterling was also a sports talk show host on the old WMCA.
The old WMCA.
Where he would scream at young kids.
Yes,
he was the Bob Grant of sports talk radio. Now he's the nicest guy in the world.
It's funny. He used to get so worked up.
Yep.
By somebody didn't thought that Cleon Jones should play more regularly or something like that.
Or trade. Come up with these stratomatic trades. My best story about John Sterling and Michael Kay. Yankees beat the Atlanta Braves, finally get back into the World Series. Late 90s, I think 97. They get the parade up the Canyon of Heroes. Rudy Giuliani is the mayor, he's the master of ceremonies. And I had to requisition one of the trucks for them. They didn't provide a truck for John Sterling and Michael Kay to go up the Canyon of Heroes.
Oh.
So there was a band from New Jersey that typically would play at Yankee Stadium. And I basically created a scenario. This is not your truck. Everybody out. The Guardian Angels, we surrounded the truck. This is the truck of John Sterling and Michael Kay. And you must cease and desist. Get off this truck now. And they were like, oh, yeah. So I requisitioned a truck that George Steinbrenner did not even get them to be in that parade. You think he'll compliment me coming up here in a few minutes? You think he'll remember that?
I think if he hears this, he'll be more than happy to.
Is he going to? Hey, John, are you going to vote for me? You're a resident of Manhattan. Come on, John, return the favor. I requisition you and Michael Kay that truck through the Canyon of Heroes.
So here's my question.
Yes,
you are the candidate who, other than Eric Adams, ran in 2021.
Correct.
Both you ran, he ran. The others did not. Well, Scott Stringer runs for everything, but we're not going to talk about that. How do you see the city in 2025 going to all the neighborhoods as compared to when you did it in 2021?
Well, I've been to all 350 neighborhoods, not just because I'm running for mayor, but as leader of the Guardian Angels. Eventually, at some point, I'd be going through these neighborhoods. I think there was a lot of disappointment in Eric Adams. Remember, the profile was he had been a cop for 22 years, moderate, African-American, Democrat, the face of the new Democratic Party. Remember, as soon as he won that heated ranked choice primary against Kathy Garcia and Maya Wiley.
He announced he was the face of the Democratic Party.
And they were referring to him as Mayor Eric Adams. And I'm doing jumping jacks saying, wait, we have a general election. Nah.
No one want to talk about that.
I knew his Achilles heel was that this guy loved the nightlife. He had that reputation long before, when he was state senator, when he was Brooklyn Borough president. And I knew it wouldn't stand up as mayor because all the eyeballs are on you when you're mayor. The problem that Cuomo would have if he became mayor is in Albany, you can disappear. Nobody knows nobody cares.
I had to explain that to Andrew when we had lunch a few months ago, even though he was governor for 11 years, I was governor for 3 years, that in Albany, half the people there, they don't even know where the governor lives. And when you're in City Hall, everyone knows where you are. The press lives with you. When you are in the shower and you come out and you open the door, there's a member of the press to ask a question. But Eric Adams' choices for how he presented himself in public, I think really began to weigh on the constituency. You know, in the beginning, he said, you know, there are a lot of these new places, so I want to go out and sample them. Okay, fine. Now let's get back down to work. But he kept doing it, and just the appearances and you know, whoever was traveling with him and that kind of thing, I don't think he recognizes.
Well, remember, he started attaching these labels onto himself. Swagger man. I got swag.
Yeah.
I'm the hip-hop mayor, wearing $5,000 customized suits. Now, to be truthful, if things were running well, nobody would have cared. Nobody cares if things are running well. They say, well, that's your personal life, as long as you're doing the job. But he surrounded himself with his friends. He didn't necessarily choose potentially the best people to aid and help him in managing this very large, complicated city. And so I think he had, in quite a few instances, people who it was beyond their ability. And then they took advantage of the friendship, and he took advantage of the friendship, and that led to a lot of corruption. Remember, you had people resigning in droves. You had indictments that were coming down. It was like endless. And then you have to give Hochul credit. She basically told him thereafter what to do. And then he capitulated to President Donald Trump so that when the president calls him, as he often does, he's looking at his Zoom laptop, and he's saying, Eric, jump. And Eric Adams is saying, how high, Mr. President? So he is a puppet now of the President of the United States. Now, we may end up getting results but it's not going to be in the best interest of the people of New York City. There are things that Donald Trump will do that are not in our best interest. And Eric Adams, at this point as mayor, is incapable of standing up for all the people, including the people who don't necessarily like him.
I actually haven't heard an ounce of criticism for either the White House, the president himself, or the policies from him. And I know he's very disappointed. He and I are longtime friends, and it's kind of like in that movie Bugsy, where they said to you help me, but I can't help you. And that's kind of where it is, because it's hard for me to defend some of these things that he says and not be thrown in that same ambit with him about what's the the position about the White House. And I don't know if that is that there's an understanding that if he doesn't win the mayor's race, maybe, he'll go to HUD or somewhere. But it's highly unusual. You just don't hear that.
No,
even sometimes you'll say, well, I respect the president very much. I think he's done a very good job. But on this one, whatever, he never does that.
No. And he has told his entire staff they are never to criticize President Donald Trump or the administration. Now, that's impossible. Being governors and mayors were always at each other's throats. Sometimes they would collectively get together and they would be at the throats of the president of the United States and his administration. You are representing your constituents, and what the president is doing, no matter who it is, it's not always in the best interest of your constituents. And the mayor can be respectful, which I would be towards Donald Trump, but there are going to be times where you have to say, I think you've overstepped your boundaries. We have recent cases of people who are going into immigration court because they came to a portal. They were paroled in by the Biden administration. They followed the rules. They're going for their immigration checkups as was required of them. You can't then just snatch them up and deport them. They're entitled to due process. You can't all of a sudden put him in the gulag in El Salvador. I realize psychologically you look at that in South America and Central America and the Caribbean and you say, I ain't coming to America. I'm not going to end up in that gulag. But we have due process in America. If somebody is caught and charged criminally, if they plea bargain out or they're found guilty, they should do the time here first and then face deportation. I know what the Trump administration is trying. They're trying to get quick results. But everybody's entitled to due process. It's the way our system operates.
And speaking of due process, what did you think of the process early in the week with Brad Lander, who went down to escort a gentleman out of the courtroom and wound up in a little tussle with the federal agents who were there? I thought it was interesting that the federal agents all had masks on and then said that they were assaulted.
Brad Lander couldn't assault a pillow, couldn't assault a paper bag. I mean, you look at him, he is the consummate image of a geek. Look, he milked it for all it was worth. That certainly momentarily helped his campaign. And ICE has a tendency at times to just overreact. You could have dealt with Brad Lander without having to tussle him and grab him and give him a headline. And vice versa, Brad Lander could have handled that differently, too. He knows there were going to be consequences, but he had already factored it out. If this happens, this is to my benefit because all of my adversaries running against me, they all came around and sang Kumbaya. Brad Lander is a victim. Yay, Academy Award for outstanding performance.
Curtis, I don't think he worked harder than me. I'd have fallen on the floor and started crying.
Oh, my God. But you see, ICE, you're right. They look ominous. Masks on. It sends the wrong message. And I understand why they do that, because then they get targeted where they live, their families. And, you know, the ultra-left really knows how to make their life miserable. But there's got to be a better way to do it. It's not a good look. It is really not a good look. That doesn't mean ICE are a bunch of thugs like Cuomo has constantly said they're thugs. But I think you have to look at what they're doing on a case-by-case basis. And everybody needs to relax.
And also, they're doing it really in the last few months, spur of the moment, not enough training, not enough organizing before you do it.
Well, they have a quota. And it's like when Bloomberg imposed the quota on stop and frisk that he later apologized before he ran for president. You can't impose quotas because then you're going to grab anybody. That's why you show up in a Home Depot parking lot and you grab the guys and gals who are there for day labor. Now, that's not necessarily the people that pose the biggest threat to our safety and to the safety of other immigrants who are here legally. By the way, a lot of legal people are here who get preyed upon, who are of the same ethnic group. So there's got to be a balance, but we cannot vilify ICE. We cannot do what Andrew Cuomo loves to do and call them thugs. I've never heard him call MS-13 thugs, 18th Street thugs, Bloods, Crips, Trinitarios. Does he even know what all those gangs are? You supporting him? Ask him, why are you calling ICE thugs?
I'll get on it right away.
Please do.
So the upshot of all of this is that the issues that we've raised today, the generational conflict is going to play a big role. It's not necessarily what Mondani said about Israel, the horrible things that offended people. It's not showing up in the polls.
No.
And that's going to be a factor that I think a lot of people have not considered, what we've discussed here today. And also what I think they really haven't considered is that when this kind of situation occurs, where you now have a multiple on top of multiple number of people running for office, including Jim Walden, who, by the way, is a jerk.
Can you repeat that?
He is a jerk.
Oh, okay.
And the reality is that there is definitely unrest, not as if it's going to turn into mass demonstrations or riots. But there's a frustration in the by the voters of the city of New York, and they're looking for something that's reasonable as opposed to people talking in absurd extremes, raising hopes they know they can't fulfill, encouraging others into conduct that might be reprehensible. And
one thing people need to know, we bridged the divide. Both you and I, we went to an auditorium in NYU to watch the graduation of the Employee of the Year here at WABC, Anthony Sliwa. He gave such a tremendous speech upon receiving his graduation certificate. And I know it made you proud, it made me proud, and a lot of people don't realize that even though Governor Paterson is supporting Andrew Cuomo, disgraziata. And we disagree on that. We agreed that Anthony, who, again, I can't say it enough, Governor Paterson, you came to his aid when he was a victim of that gang assault outside of the McDonald's on 2nd Avenue near 96th Street, where you're mentoring him and raising him with Mary, his mother, doing an outstanding job. But you jumped in. You got clipped yourself. Yet you put everything at risk for Anthony, and it was great to be with you in that auditorium because we put all of our political differences aside. And as soon as we walked outside, I said, David, I'm proud that you and I could stand together. Because I'll get you, my little pretty. You supported Cuomo, huh? You backstabber.
Thank you all for listening to The Left versus the Right. I'll be back next week. Curtis may be back. Who knows what may happen? But thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.